The world's writers will walk through those gates, and if you hang around, you get a chance to talk to them.
I'm interested in conversations that deal with things that matter, but real, how do we live our lives?
First of all, make climate change personal in your life. The second step is get angry and get active. And the third step, and believe it or not, I think this is the most important, we have to imagine this world that we want to hurry towards.
It's about kindness is looking at people as people and not as I voted this, I do this, whatever it is. There are some people we will never get along with, but most of us are a complex mass of different things.
Hello, I'm Ian Rankin. I've been with the Edinburgh International Book Festival basically since day one. I went as a student, as a reader, as a fan of writing. Later on, I was invited to go as an author, which was a thrill. And it's a spectacular experience. It's a meeting of minds. It's a way to open your mind to new experiences, to new ideas, nuanced debate, entertainment, something for every age group. And that's what keeps me going back year after year after year. Long may it continue.
A very warm welcome to the 2020 Edwin Morgan Poetry Award. My name is David Kinloch and I'm the current chair of the Edwin Morgan Trust. The Trust was set up in 2010 after Edwin's death, and its main aim is to support and foster the work of young poets living and working in Scotland, and indeed to support Scottish poetry more generally. The award is given every 2 years, and this will be the 4th occasion on which the prize has been made. The award is for an unpublished collection of poems by a poet under the age of 30. This year, the judges were the distinguished poets Kathleen Jamie and John Glenday. And I have to say a big thank you to both Kathleen and John for all the energy and good humour and effort that they put into reading a very substantial number of applications. Morgan wanted this prize to go to young poets for two main reasons, I think. One of them was quite personal. As a young man, he struggled to find his own personal poetic voice, and he also found it quite difficult to get a substantial collection of poems published initially. So I think he hoped that a prize of this kind would be a way of giving a young poet the opportunity to focus without distraction on a substantial work that they might eventually manage to get published. The other reason, I think, was because Edwin Morgan was himself a teacher for most of his life. He gave a great many poetry readings in secondary schools and in university settings. For him, young people simply were the future, and he was himself a famously future-oriented, future-directed poet. So the Edwin Morgan Award is really a way of continuing those strands of his work after his death. 2020 is, of course, a very special year for a number of reasons. First of all, 2020 is the centenary of Edwin's birth, and the Trust has organised and supported a considerable number of initiatives to mark this special occasion. 2020 is also the year of a global pandemic, a pandemic that has turned all our worlds upside down. I can't say for sure how Edwin Morgan would have felt about that coincidence of dates, but I do know that his famous typewriter would have been clattering away. And I think he would have seen the pandemic as a challenge, and he would have hoped perhaps that poets would be among the people who were grappling with it and confronting it and trying to understand it and communicate that understanding to other people. It's been interesting to witness how so many have turned to the healing and invigorating power of poetry in these difficult times. Perhaps this is because one of the things poetry understands is how important language is in the way that we care for and communicate with other people. These are qualities that are self-evidently on display in the work of the young poets that we're now going to hear from. So it's my great pleasure to introduce each of the poets in turn. They will be reading in alphabetical order. So first up is Colin Bramwell.
Hi folks, my name is Colin Bramwell, and I was really very happy indeed to find out that my collection Jigsaw had been shortlisted for the 2020 Edwin Morgan Poetry Prize. I'm going to read you a couple of poems from Jigsaw now. The first of these is called The Lost Elephant, and it's a poem that I wrote about losing a favourite childhood toy of mine on the move from Ayrshire to the Black Isle when I was pretty young. As you can tell, I'm still not over the loss. Yes, this poem's called The Lost Elephant. Dream that I have lost you in my home. On the cold march further northwards now, I cross another mountain pass alone. Elephants of cotton have been known to hide in cupboards when it's time to go. Dream that I have lost you in my home, for I was two. You were my homophone. Distant headlights, moving fast and slow, crossed another mountain pass alone. And then you showed up, your fur the colour of stone. I could have sworn that you were all pink, though. Dream that I have lost you in my home, then wake to find you marching out for Rome. Promise me that you will leave your shadow and cross another mountain pass alone, your soft back shrugging off a soldier's throne. Another homesick soldier in the snow dreams that he has lost you in his home. Cross another mountain pass alone. Yep, still not over it, as you can tell. The last poem that I'm going to read for you, and also the last poem in Jigsaw, is called Epilogue, and this is how it goes. The real gift of a floating off balloon is in the action it necessitates. The looking up, the wave, the see you soon, the passive world the child reanimates. The red without which blue cannot be known to blue surrenders. In this act of sinking, one beloved thing is lost in time. Better not to turn what's gone to stone, not to write what one ought to be thinking. There is better refuge in the unknown. The jigsaw sinks. The sea around it doesn't. The sky is what it keeps, although it isn't. We are made of what we have forgot. Memories like that, except it's not. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Colin. Next up is Michael Grieve.
Hi there, I'm Michael Grieve and I'm going to read you a couple of poems. The first one that I'm going to read takes its title from the street that I live on. I live in Cooper and we're only a couple of minutes walk from the River Eden. The poem also refers to the noise that you can hear from inside my flat, which you may be able to hear at the moment. Sorry about that. Bonnygate. Here, in our first high-ceilinged flat, with a view over the main drag, where gate has no sense of boundary, but of way, and where street noises, the first rush of the day and the fighting and singing of drunks become the murmur that we live against. Every home we live in our lives will have started here, where, on the first warm day of the year, we jammed a knife into the painted sash to raise it up, only for its breezy crash an hour later to send this hairline crack across the corner of a pane. We lack the wherewithal to have it mended, and lifting the sash, I am reminded of how our brittle clarities are prone to come apart, and of how this alone could undo anything. Our rattled frame, the house that frames it, the ancient name framing the house. I am reminded too of how time shows herself in residue, then patina, then dereliction. The gradual dust and gradual action of mould in the break. I set in place our half-repair, a hinge with which we brace the sash, and listen as dusty air breathes freely through the room. A pair of passing children tiff. A scaffolder completes the job. When we are older and have, I hope, moved on, continued loving, and when these noises fade to almost nothing, listen. Is the River Eden running? And the next one that I'm going to read for you is a clear reference to Keats, obviously, but it's also a wee poem expressing just how much I enjoyed Emily Wilson's recent translation of Homer's Odyssey. On first looking into Emily Wilson's Homer. If I have ever heard this told before, I swear my ears must have been plugged with wax. Or else I was distracted by a roar of wind that carried off the tune. The backs of all those weighty books are broken, their pages foxed and scattered to the seas where the loose weft of their rhythm slackens, and I lose the thread of their grand odysseys. But here, at last, the story's homing in, with its lines taut enough to fire an arrow and woven close enough to catch a wind and cut across the foam. I am no hero, but I hear the song and taste salt on my lip. Tie me to the spine of this great ship. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Michael. Now David Linklater is going to read for us.
Hey everyone, I'm David Linklater. I've got two poems to read to you today. Now, the first one I'm going to read was written in response to a painting called The Sylwesters Arbroath by the Scottish artist Maurice Grassi. The poem is called Pilgrim Territories. Hard work, my father taught the meaning. Oily tracks on his palms handed down from his father and his father before him. Artisans of the firth, casting, hauling boys rolling in kicks. Mind Finlay and Big Dick, old boys out to catch the elusive thing, and no one knew what it was. The dawn, the marigold daughter that cut through waves rearing up with white hooves on cold mornings. Foam buckshot from a magnificent shotgun, the clouds raging bulls. gone to memory with the men that sailed them. Other times, seas smooth as a glass disc, bottlenoses doing their silken dance, knowing to steer clear of Will Pat and the boys out there netting the great blueness. Once a shadow moved under the boat and it was like God finally spoke, and bells tolled through mist, making it yield, a life passed down, fingers 1,000 tides deep, gutting the silver-skinned chromosomes, keeping it all singing. I picked up tradition as if it were a shoe, and tried some others in my time, but my body is water, and I wear it like the seabed. With my sou'wester, yellow as a pale sun, I'll be gone. And when I come home, wash the salt and oil from the divots of my skin, sand will flash from the basin, punctures in the night. The boys out there plain-faced. I could not, for the life of me, know a world on land. So that was the first poem. The second one I'm going to read to you is called Lapwing, and it has a quote at the start from a song by the Grateful Dead called Broke Down Palace. Now the song was written by Robert Hunter and Jerry Garcia, and the quote goes, "Mama, mama, many worlds I've come since I first left home. Today, staring at the blankness, thinking of what you would have done with it. The sky is on a different level. Each sentence has a missing word. Your head back laugh, your thunderous thigh clap that meant you got it right, and I've never seen anyone make clothes bloom like that. Green lady, you lapwing, you leap with a flicker in it. Go about your business. Find outlines and put colour there. Your name in italics, peach-faced lovebird, red hair from a red beret, leaving the broke-down palace. Away, out into the air where there is no end to any of it. So many leaves are falling. Go and be with them." Thank you. Thanks for listening. Take care of yourselves. Be good to each other. See ya.
Thank you very much, David. And next, Paul Malgrati is going to read.
Hello there, I'm Paul Malgrati, and I'm going to read you a couple of poems from my poetry manuscript, Poems Écossais. The first one is called Eden upon Tay. Hey, ye loved in the way that we loved, at the bark by a quirk o' our heart, when the murk o' the gloamin' had sprang fae balustrades we swung, tween the firth and the glacier that loomed upon us. Hey, oh, hey, ye loved in that way, in the way that I mean, aboon men and their sickar defeat, aboon lovers and their bidie in despair o' dawn, in the way that I mean, at the bark, when we couldna abide by this world, and abolished its pride in the druth o' messiahs and kisses I'd bide in, before fear and rain and the fall. The second poem is a rather historical one. It is inspired by Mary Queen of Scots, of course, an important character for me, because perhaps the chief Scots and French speaker of history, and of course Scoto-French monarch. It is set in the childhood, the bairnhead of Mary Stuart, when she was in the castle of Fontainebleau in the south of Paris, before she returned to Scotland to become queen. And in there, I think I wanted to portray her through an unusual kind of French-Scots language, as well as, well, a young girl before accessing to power, wondering about the dangers, the pitfall of powers, and addressing her mother, Mary de Guise, who was Scotland's Queen Regent at the time. So here we go. Forêt de Fontainebleau, 18 January 1553, Bairnhead o Mary Stuart. Mother, dear mare, please dinna switch it off. Keep a dim light between my lips and the dark. Please dinna. I would I kiss mysel lucid in sicht of my soul offlit before sleep. Mother, dear Marie, like me, dinna turn round and look at me, parfait and proud in my bed, Stuart-like and bound for to reign the morrow, when I wake fi camstery and goustery dreams. Maman, 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 abide by me, breathe with me stiff through the dark webs of power. Ye and your curls, electric and wireless, say passé in your pyjamas, o old queen. Please, mare, bide a while and look at me, ya bairn, gae bold though feart. For she hears her ain cell in the gloom, and black mares a trotting.
Thank you, Paul. And now we're going to hear from Alycia Pirmohamed.
I'm going to be reading 2 poems today from my collection that's been shortlisted for the Edwin Morgan Prize, which is really exciting. The first one is called House of Prayer, and it kind of came to be written during a trip I took to Tanzania with my father. So it's kind of written around that time. And it's kind of about the solace of faith and spirituality, but also kind of the complexity of that relationship as well. House of Prayer. I walk into the beads of 33 Alhamdulillahs. I walk into my childhood mouth, repeat Alhamdulillah. 4 decades ago, Father too walked into this prayer, his body nested in the oblong bowing, his Alhamdulillah humming deep until it matched the scale of the engine. It was during that first crossing from one Alhamdulillah to another home that my father crushed open the chasm he has since passed down to every poem I write. The hollow, the forgotten Quran lodged deep in the night of an unopened drawer. My quest to belong. Alhamdulillah, forgive me, I praise once again, a symmetry like the wings of a migrating bird. I repeat Alhamdulillah, and rinse and repeat, and rinse and repeat like the rock of an egret. I hold this thusby to count my Alhamdulillahs 33 times, 99 times. The key is to walk again and again into the holy, repeating Alhamdulillah, 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 until the skyward calm. Father, what did you hope for when you uttered Alhamdulillah? when you rinsed over the Atlantic in that giant bird, when the egg cracked open and the yolk of Alhamdulillah spilled onto a new coast? Was it traveling homeward or away from homeland? I have learned that Alhamdulillah does not resemble a border, but it is a house of its own. Alhamdulillah glints beyond language. Praise be to God. My Western tongue holds the syllables, unhooks the praise in my own last name, Hamed. Always I recite Alhamdulillah. And the second poem I'm going to read is called Origin of Water. And a lot of my poems in this collection and just in general have to do with the metaphor of water being kind of a metaphor for crossings and hybridity, and just kind of how the flexibility of time, I guess. Origin of Water. As a child, she wore a skirt of seagulls and was afraid of the dark. Called her mother God, because what else could mother an ocean but God? She ate nankatai and plaited her hair. She smelled of fennel seed newly crushed and scattered. She split into Spring's tulips, carried a jar of condolences just in case. She was a daughter caught praying in the mountains. She was stone through stone, melodic, a vase of trees rattled by her name, water. Like the roots that hold the earth together, like Ganan and its woven stanzas. She is the sound of a messenger calling for another bird, another metaphor for God. As a child, how was she to know what to call beloved? Thank you for listening.
Thanks, Alycia. Next up is Kirsten Kerr.
Hi, I'm Kirsten, and I'm going to read a couple of poems for you today from my collection, From the Din. The first one is about a dunnock, that wee unassuming bird you see flitting about the hedgerows. A dunnock, harvest time. Wheat emblazons your eye until mine falls through, flexing what's in your sight to gold, thinking for a moment I know what you see, but I don't. This next one also features a bird, but in a slightly different way, and it's called Scarecrow. I was a bird then, feathered among other things, when I would slip my own skin for the flight of it and peel from this earth to the next, the current of my veins wind-driven northwesterly, unclipped. I knew the very tips of the pine trees, my beak sharp, my wing beat was flint spark. Now I am fright, like the greedy hand that dips, warm and strange, into the nest. Thank you for listening.
Thank you very much, Kirsten. And finally, we're going to hear from Stewart Sanderson.
Hi, I'm Stewart Sanderson and I'm a poet from Glasgow, and I'm going to do a few poems for you now. And the first one is called Pictish, and it refers to the Pictish language, an extinct language related to the other Celtic languages, but about which very little is known. Pictish. Listen to the wind where this language was. The whisper as it passes through the long grass at St. Vigians. The leaves at Aberlemno. Read on past the pause where its kinglist ebbs away into the waters of a new tongue. So the river Ewe runs downhill towards its sea loch. Reach out and touch the topsoil to which its syllables remain attached. An anchor lodged in sand years after the ship has rotted. Throw one last log on the fire as you pronounce their names. Nachten and Brood, Drosten and Drest. Then let them blend like smoke does with the midnight air. As a writer, I'm very interested in language, in lots of things about language and in translation as well, as Morgan was. And I'm interested in the history of language and in oddities and strange words that maybe find their way in to your life by circuitous ways. And this next poem is called Tinsale, and it takes its title from a word I found in the Dictionary of the Scots Language. Tinsale, which glosses as the losing of possessions, loss, detriment, harm, destruction. So I guess in many ways is something of a word for our times, but there's also, I hope, something in here about how language and the sheer act of writing and raising your voice can also be perhaps intrinsically hopeful. Perhaps. Tinsale. A term for when the tin's been sold, and all the tinsel taken down, for when we feel a tingling cold, or find a shot stag's hollow crown out on the moor. Then count the times to tell how many years have blown past while it wandered in the pines and windy places, where our lack takes solid form, a wall which dwines by increments into the slack ground by a freshly planted wood of firs, spread like a dark green crack through fields where people's houses stood. Tinsale, a word we're losing now as language thins, a word which could come back, perhaps, teaching us how to talk about what's happening. And as we walk into the lough of our own tinsale, find something to sing about, be it so small as this one word, which we let ring, despite the bleakness of it all. Thanks very much.
Thank you very much, Stewart. And now we're going to turn to the judges, to Kathleen Jamie and to John Glenday, who are going to talk a little bit about reading Edwin Morgan and reading the collections of poems that were submitted to this year's competition. And then the moment that we've all been waiting for, they are going to announce the names of the winner and the runner-up. My warmest congratulations to all the shortlisted poets.
Hi there, I'm John Glenday and I'm one of the judges for this year's Edwin Morgan Poetry Award, the centenary of Edwin Morgan, of course. And we're sitting here in my dining room in Kinloch.
Hello, and I'm Kathleen Jamie. I'm the other judge for this year's award, and John is hosting us in his lovely house in Kinloch with our dogs, so there may be cameo appearances from collie dogs and noises off. So please ignore them and concentrate on poetry, which is what we're here to talk about. And Edwin Morgan himself, actually, who has funded this award, of course, as part of his legacy. But we both remember Eddie Morgan as a living person, which is a wonderful thing to remember, and his particular way of speaking his poems, his energetic, voluble way of speaking, which you always hear, well, I always hear now when I turn to his poems again. But did you ever meet Eddie?
I met him once, reading in Dundee with you, I think, some years ago. Yeah. And you know, it's the generosity of his personality that came over to me meeting him. But I heard him read many times in the past, and you know, we talk about this as being his legacy. Part of this as being his legacy, this award, but his poetry is the main legacy for me. How wide-ranging it was, and how absurdly playful he was, and yet combining that with this ability to craft a poem and that skill that you need to break the rules, you know. So he was a wonderful legacy for Scotland.
Yeah, the energy of him. I think I saw his play, Surrounded de Bergerac, translated into Scots in Dundee, which was a wonderful. I mean, the use of Scots in that. It was a revelation to me.
Yeah.
But his legacy, now that he's gone, of course, is in funding not least this competition for young poets under the age of 30. And that's what John and I have been doing over this lockdown period, is reading 60 manuscripts. No, when they arrived I was astonished. I thought there was going to be 20, if that. You know, how many young poets in Scotland do we have that are capable of producing an entire manuscript? I was really taken aback by the size of this box that arrived.
But the other thing for me was, and this may have just been me reading into it, but so many of the concerns that are addressed in these manuscripts that were submitted are concerns that Eddie addressed, and the forms that they used are forms that he used. So we had concrete poems for this competition. We had translations from the South American writers, from Chinese writers. We had formal sonnets. We had voice poems, you know. And it's almost as if he's legitimised the use of this in Scots, and that's a wonderful thing, I think.
This competition, I can't imagine what a boost it would be. Of course, it didn't exist when we were under 30. You know, what a boost it would be to any poet's career to be acknowledged with such a substantial award. You know,
I know. Not
only the money, which, my good grief, you know.
Yeah.
But the affirmation for not just the winner and the runner-up, but those who have been shortlisted. I mean, I hope they take it as an affirmation. You know.
They most definitely will, because it's such a wonderfully generous award. But for me, the money is a great part of it. The money draws attention to the award, and it's a wonderful gift to a young writer. I mean, how I wish I was 29 again, you know, so I could go for it. And that's my ambition.
I don't know. The competition is pretty fierce.
Oh yeah, I know. But also the way that these young people are responding in a way to work that was written by someone who was still publishing books in his 80s. In fact, he was collaborating with rock musicians in his 80s.
I look forward to that. Yeah, it's an idea of how to be old as well as how to be young that he's given us. Of course, he was Eddie Morgan was Scotland's first national poet. In his 80s. You know,
that's right.
It's an honour, I think, that should go to the elders. He was the first, and rose to it wonderfully, as you say, when he was already in his 80s. Do we want to talk about how we went about this during lockdown? I mean, because we couldn't meet. It was all done by correspondence.
We talk about the process of picking that shortlist.
How to reduce that 60 odd manuscripts down to a working shortlist of, I don't know how many we have, 10 or so.
We had 10 of a shortlist. I mean, for me, the easiest stage is probably the first stage, when you have 60 manuscripts, and the only process I know is reading through it again and again, and finding those manuscripts which rise to the surface is really getting stronger with each reading, or making an impact with each reading. And there's always a proportion which pretty quickly we know aren't probably going to make that shortlist, that somehow there's no evidence of the craft and the skill that's necessary to build poems. And a lot of the time I felt they were speaking to themselves, these poems. They weren't really leaving space for a reader to be included in the poem.
And I don't remember us disagreeing at that stage, and it was pretty apparent to both of us, the few which were going to carry forward to a long list, and those which were not.
That's right, because I remember being terrified when I had my shortlist, thinking, oh my God, Kathleen's going to come up with another 10 completely different poems. But the concordance was quite remarkable.
I think that's because of the work that was shortlisted, not any mystical communion between you and me, but it was in the work itself. So the ones that went forward to a shortlist, that was, as you say, quite an easy process really. And then once we had a shortlist, then then the real work begins, in a sense. But what is it that makes a book of poems levitate off the pile and become shortlistable?
I don't think there's any one factor, is there? For some of them, some of the collections attracted my attention immediately. There was something accessible, there was something vivid in the way they wrote, there was an intelligence in the way they addressed the subject matter. And I can remember looking at reading through a manuscript and thinking, well, that's going to be on my shortlist, I know that. And there were others that would creep up on you. There were a few manuscripts where I thought at first, yeah, this one's got something going for it. And then the more I looked at it, the more that would grow on me and the poems would accumulate. But I think there are lots of factors that I would choose them.
For me, it's about listening to the language. The idea that the poet is attending to language, not just typing, really acutely listening. However form that takes eventually doesn't matter, but the fact that they're in a relationship with the language too. So we drew up a short list of however many.
Well, I think we were 10 in our short list, yeah.
And then we had to work out a sort of ranking and eventually come up with a winner. Were we in agreement about that? I think we were, weren't we?
We were pretty much in agreement from the shortlist. I seem to remember lots of negotiation and discussion going on about the strengths and merits of manuscripts, that we were in agreement with our shortlist. And when it came to refining it down to those final two, the agreement was there as well. I don't think there was any point where we were desperately arguing for the opposite.
No, I don't remember that. No, there's no slamming doors. So, does that bring us to the winners? And
I think probably that's the way we should go.
Everybody's arrived. The dogs have arrived for this great moment.
I'm delighted to announce that the runner-up for the 2020 Edwin Morgan Poetry Award is Colin Bramwell for Jigsaw. Hooray! I really enjoyed this collection. It stood out right away for me as a book that was so well put together. As the title suggests, it's the collection is a game in itself. These interlocking poems which go from a birth in the air in the west coast of Scotland to growing up in the Black Isle, and in between there's this wonderful mixture, this description of Scotland in general. Some of the poems are incredibly focused, or lost childhood toys. There are translations from South American and Chinese writers, and all in all, the book is totally enthralling. And it was one of those collections which the more you read it, the more you want to pick it up again. I totally loved it.
Excellent, so congratulations there. And that means it falls to me to reveal the winner of this year's Edwin Morgan Poetry Award, which is Alycia Pirmohamed's book, The Ghosts That Visit Us As We Dream. Now, Alycia is a person who is relatively new to Scotland, and her work is extending Scottish poetry in ways we had hitherto unimagined. And that was the joy of reading this accomplished and daring and lyrical collection. The imagery and diction arise from places as diverse as Dar es Salaam in Alberta, as well as Scotland. And the poems are luxuriant with long, rich lines. And she controls a vibrant language with a formal precision. So the poems are both exotic, if we can use that word, and uncluttered, and create an original and illuminating world. There's a genuine sense of the poems have been written as loving explorations of profound human concerns, of place and family, and especially women's heritage. And they lead us on a journey through the poet's life, which in its unfolding informs our lives too. So that was a unanimous decision, I think we can say.
Absolutely.
And congratulations to Alycia.
Congratulations.
Hello, Alycia. I'm Robyn Marsack from the Edwin Morgan Trust. I'm one of the trustees. It's a pleasure to see you. I'm sorry that we're not meeting in person at the Edinburgh International Book Festival, but I'm just here to ask you what it means to you to be on the Edwin Morgan Poetry Award shortlist. And perhaps you could also say something about what you as a young writer value in Edwin Morgan's poetry.
Okay, sure. Well, first of all, to be shortlisted for this award is the most incredible experience. I think for a lot of reasons, for the fact that to be a younger poet, like an emerging poet, to be recognized is really nice by peers and by the community that you live in, especially with, you know, this award based in Scotland. I've lived here for a while now, and I think it's one of those things that just helps you feel like you belong in the community, which is really nice, because I think over the years I've made really great connections with the people that I've met in the poetry community, and then through like the Scottish BME Writers Network, and so it's just been a really wonderful experience to feel recognized as a poet in the community that I'm in. That means a lot, especially as someone that, you know, was born in Canada and moved here. I think it's just a nice way to feel like I'm like rooting in a community as well. And then for your second question, I think Edwin Morgan's poetry is so fantastic for me to look toward as a newer writer or an emerging writer, because the breadth of it is just incredible. And as I put together like my first few pamphlets, and I like noticed that I was gravitating toward like particular themes and styles, but seeing Edwin Morgan's work, all like there's like so much experimental work, but then there's also, you know, there's like sonnets, and so I think seeing the range of work is really encouraging for someone who wants to start maybe experimenting with new themes or topics or styles, and just seeing that you can journey through all of that is great.
No matter what age you are, because he was still experimenting when he was much older than you are. Well, it's my very happy pleasure to tell you, Alycia, that the judges have decided to give you the Edwin Morgan Poetry Award for 2020.
Like they've actually decided already?
They have decided, and you are the award this year.
Oh my God! What?
Yes. I hope this comes as very happy news for you. You will be able to read the judges' own comments in the pamphlet that we've produced, and you will see how highly they thought of your poetry. And so I'm delighted to be the one who's giving you that news.
Thank you so much. I thought you were going to ask me some questions. That's amazing. Thank you. Wow. Wow. I don't even know what to say.
We thought that even as a poet and a writer, you might be left wordless by this particular news, but we hope that it makes you feel even more a part of that community, and that this is a wonderful recognition of your work and of your future potential too.
Thank you so much. Thank you to the judges. It means a lot to receive this award, because I think being a writer is such a hard profession to undertake because of all the barriers that we come up against, financial barriers. There's like a lot of rejection along the way as well. So I'm so excited to be able to use this to just continue, especially as I like reach this point in my career where I just sort of finished my PhD, and I'm like looking toward the future. It feels like there's actually going to be like some way to pursue being a professional writer, which often is really hard to do when you don't have that support, financially and otherwise, and community-wise too. Yeah, thank you so much. That's so incredible. Thank you.
I thought it would be appropriate to end with a poem by Edwin Morgan himself, and one I think that is fitting for the times that we live in. Here is Edwin Morgan's poem, At 80. Push the boat out, compañeros, push the boat out, whatever the sea. Who says we cannot guide ourselves through the boiling reefs, black as they are? The enemy of us all makes sure of it. Mariners, keep good watch always for that last passage of blue water we have heard of and long to reach, no matter if we cannot, no matter, in our 80-year-old timbers, leaking and patched as they are, but sweet, well seasoned with the scent of woods long perished, serviceable still in unarrested pungency of salt and blistering sunlight. Out, push it all out into the unknown. Unknown is best. It beckons best, like distant ships in mist, or bells clanging ruthless from stormy buoys.